Several regions in Europe produce a surplus of nutrients. There is an excess of manure from intensive livestock production, as well as urban waste, including household food waste, green cuttings, and human waste in the form of sewage sludge. And yet, most farmers have to buy mineral fertilizers to meet their crop nutrition requirements. However, there are innovative technologies available that recover existing surplus nutrients and safely treat them for their use in the field. Take ammonium salts, for example. They are obtained by ammonia stripping or from chemical air scrubbers and are ideal for injecting nitrogen into the soil. Another example is compost. The composition of compost can vary depending on its origin, but is an excellent soil improver. A third example is struvite. These granules are produced from a fraction of manure or digested sewage sludge and serve as a slow-release phosphorus fertilizer. These are only a few of many possible technologies developed to make use of the local nutrient surplus. Using recycling-derived fertilizers instead of mineral fertilizers has many advantages. As you use the nutrient surplus locally, you contribute to a circular economy. Transporting excess phosphorus from animal manure to regions with a shortage reduces the need to import rock phosphate from outside Europe. Furthermore, our research shows that these recycling-derived fertilizers can be the equivalent to mineral fertilizers and deliver the same crop yields while reducing costs. So for your next fertilization strategy, be sure to consider recycling-derived fertilizers. Want to know more? Contact us for more information.
Moin und herzlich willkommen bei Soy-Konzept am Industriestandort Friedhof in Luxemburg. Mein Name ist Alex-Kolomitsjuk, Projektleiter bei Soy-Konzept, und ich bin für die Umstellung der Kompostierungsanlage auf eine energetische Verwertung zuständig. Wir nehmen bei Soy-Konzept biogen, organische und holzige Abfallstoffe an. Dazu gehört der Klärschlamm und Grünschnitt mit einer Jahresannahmekapazität von jeweils ca. 8000 Tonnen. Unsere derzeitige Aktivität ist die Aufbereitung von Klärschlamm und Grünschnitt in einem Rotteprozess zu einem hochwertigen, RAL-zertifizierten Gütekompost. In der biologischen Trocknung wird das vermischte Material hygienisiert und stabilisiert, bis es gesiebt und für eine Ausbringung in die Landwirtschaft bereit ist. Durch die Verschärfung der Grenzwerte seitens der Behörden stagniert unsere Abnahme von unserem Kompost. Die Lagerbestände wachsen stark, sodass wir vor der Herausforderung stehen, neue Verwertungswege zu finden. Dieses Problem ist nicht nur ein Problem in Luxemburg, sondern betrifft auch viele weitere Klärschlammentsorgungsunternehmen in Europa. Um regionale Abfälle weiter annehmen zu können, hat Soy-Konzept eine eigene thermische Klärschlammverwertungsanlage entwickelt und Schritt für Schritt aufgebaut. Die Enercom-Anlage ist für Klärschlamm und Grünschnitt ausgelegt und kann aus dem Abfall Dampf, Strom, Wärme und Pellets produzieren. In der ersten von 2 Phasen wurde die Infrastruktur für die thermische Klärschlammverwertungsanlage geschaffen. Dazu gehört eine effiziente Trocknung mit überhitztem Dampf. Die Energie für die Trocknung liefert hierzu der bereits installierte Biomassekessel, welcher mit holzigem Grünschnitt betrieben wird. Der getrocknete Brennstoff mit Klärschlammanteil kann anschließend in einem Wirbelschichtreaktor bei 900 Grad Celsius zu brennbarem Synthesegas umgewandelt werden. Die Hälfte des produzierten Synthesegases wird in einem Gaskessel zur Dampferzeugung genutzt. Die andere Hälfte des Gases wird in diesem Jahr in der zweiten Phase zur Stromerzeugung in einer Kraft-Wärme-Kopplungsanlage genutzt. Dieser Schritt erfolgt bis Ende des Jahres. Die gesamte überschüssige Wärme aus Trocknung, dem Dampfkessel und der Kraft-Wärme-Kopplungsanlage soll zunächst im bereits verlegten Nahwärmenetz zur Lohntrocknung genutzt werden. Es besteht auch die Möglichkeit, den um uns herum entstehenden Industriegebiet mit Fernwärme zu versorgen. Neben Strom und Wärme fallen Aschen aus thermischen Prozessen an. Diese beinhaltet wertvollen Phosphor, welcher als Düngemittelstoff eingesetzt werden kann. Genau diese Asche wird in dem Interreg-Projekt ReNu2Farm auf Pflanzenverfügbarkeit getestet.
Okay, I think we'll start off there. So, hello everyone. I would like to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Niamh Power from Munster Technological University. I will be the moderator of this session. So I'd like to welcome you all to the ReNu2Farm parallel session. Today, this session will highlight the findings of the ReNu2Farm project. We have three excellent speakers lined up for you. We have Katja Weiler, we have Dr. Ivona Sigurnjak, and we have Imke Harms. So we'll start off with the speakers and we'll follow this by a question and answer session at the end. If you have any questions for your speakers, please just pop them in the chat and we'll put these questions to the speakers at the end of the session. If there's any people here from the ReNu2Farm project, and if you have further details which will help our speakers answer the questions, please send them directly to the work package leader. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker this morning is Katja Weiler from IZES. Katja will give you an introduction to the ReNu2Farm project, and you'll highlight the overall project aims and project outcomes. So take it away there, Katja.
Hello, I'm Katja Weiler. Welcome to the ReNu2Farm project panel. We know it's a tough job gathering all important data and results from public funded European projects. So that's why we wrap up today all essential research activities from ReNu2Farm project to help you accelerate your way to get free access on project findings. In the next minutes, I will guide you in the role of the project lead through the outline of the ReNu2Farm project, including a wrap-up of all activities and results the consortium has performed. Concerning the project outline, ReNu2Farm addresses the challenge of low recycling rates of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus along the primary production food chain in Northwest Europe. Currently, fertilizer production is largely depending on important mineral fertilizers, aggravating impacts on dependencies and environmental loads. Against that, in Northwest Europe agriculture, there are regional hotspots with a surplus of nitrogen and phosphorus loads where the nutrient recovery could get made accessible. In ReNu2Farm, the consortium of 10 partners from research and industry settled in Ireland, UK, Germany, Netherlands, Belgium, France, and Luxembourg have started their joint research in 2017 with a total budget of nearly 4 million euro. The objectives of the project have been to understand the farmers and fertilizer producers' needs for RDF market uptake, to improve RDF qualities, to meet agronomic needs, and to activate the interregional RDF trades from surplus regions to demand regions in Northwest Europe. When I'm talking about RDF, you see here also on the slides, it means the recycling-derived fertilizers in the project. Originally, the project would end in December this year, but it has been approved to maximize the impact on its RDF research. We will continue our collaboration to research on RDF market uptake for the horticulture and the private use sector as new target groups until March 2023. One main pillar was the research on the current production of the recycling-derived fertilizers and the characterization of these nutrients. We conducted a survey on the current nutrient recovery technologies in Northwest Europe, but also performed in practice nutrient recovery upcycling technologies adoptions by our project partners Autotech and Soil Concept on sewage sludge and greenery cutting gasification technologies. In total, we analyzed 24 different RDFs from 20 producers to characterize their phytochemical composition on, for example, their plant available nutrient pool in incubation settings. The main focus was also set towards nitrogen and carbon incubation experiments at the Irish and Belgian partner university laboratories. Besides the RDF production and characterization, we followed a bottom-up approach and conducted field and pod trials to perform agro-ecological assessments of 15 different RDFs. In total, we facilitated full field trials in 4 countries in 2019 and 2020 with 5 different crops. On the slide, you can read which crops we have conducted. In order to identify best practice management for farmers, we conducted environmental impact assessments. This comprised the impacts of microbial and nematode communities as indicators for soil health and nutrient mobilizations. Also nitrate leaching modeling as indicators for nutrient retentions, as well as CO2 footprints alongside the entire trading chain have been core elements for the agroecological research. Coming now to the target groups and addressing them, what did we do? Starting here with our main target group, farmers. The main aim was to increase the knowledge and to promote the use of RDF to the main target group farmers in the partner regions. So we started with a huge survey on the acceptance, knowledge and awareness of farmers on RDF in Northwest Europe. With and for farmers, we have facilitated demonstration events and learning networks in all regions to share the results on RDFs. But also to spread out the RDF knowledge on a long term. A set of communication and educational materials have been developed. This comprises also online fertilization decision support tools for farmers to assist them in their RDF choice and in its management. But also further promotional material, as for example, a handbook of best practices and educational videos on RDF are available for the whole interested target groups. Coming here also to our second main important target groups, the producers. The second ReNu2Farm target group, the producers, we facilitated for them a series of workshops. Our mission for them was to share our findings in order to improve RDF production to meet here the agronomic needs. So we presented the outcomes of the RDF farmer survey and the regional mappings on different RDF demand structures in Northwest Europe. In close cooperation with the producers, we conducted also a RDF technique inventory report or produced a book and several videos on success stories on RDF productions. And finally, we developed a market introduction strategy for RDF in Northwest Europe. We were also addressing, of course, the policymakers, because the trade and the use of RDFs in Europe, or especially in Northwest Europe, is also limited because of the legal framework situation. The RDFs are often produced from waste or from animal byproducts, so that the end products are considered as waste products, which hampers the interregional trade. Therefore, we identified the legal status of each RDF, and as a result, specific legal barriers for this regional market uptake became obvious. For them, these have been communicated on different policy workshops and public events. Coming now to my last slide. As I said in the beginning, we had the big chance to go forward to maximize the project impact. Within the capitalization funding, the so-called intercapitalization period, we are allowed to go on with our research until March 2023. we will research for new RDF markets by addressing new target groups. Here, the horticulture sector represents the second largest RDF sale market after the agriculture. And also the private use and recreational sector could boost the public acceptance of RDFs. So therefore, we will conduct tailor-made research for these new target groups to increase the RDF uptake in Northwest Europe even more. So that was the wrap-up of our ReNu2Farm research. Thank you very much for your attention. Visit our project website to get free access to the research and feel free to contact us for further information. Thank you very much and enjoy the next presentation.
Thank you very much, Katja. I must admit that was a very nice and interesting presentation, and I think an excellent way to kickstart the session. I think all the participants here have a much clearer and better understanding of the project, but they also have an understanding of how we in ReNu2Farm try to put the farmer's needs and the farmer's requirements at the heart of it to ensure that we can get a wider uptake of recycling-derived fertilizers. I would like to remind people that if you do have any questions for Katja or for any of our speakers today, please just pop it in the chat and we'll put it to the speakers in the question and answer session later. We will move on to our second speaker. So our second speaker in this parallel session is Dr. Ivona Sigurnjak from the University of Ghent. Ivona is going to bring us through various aspects of the project, including maybe a greater understanding of the problem or the challenge of RDF and why it's a challenge to move it around Europe. We'll also look at the composition of RDFs and also look at the outcome of the stakeholder engagement element through an extensive survey with farmers. So I'll pass you over to Ivona. So Ivona there, take it away in your presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ivona Sigurnjak, and I'm going to present today results from work package 1 that focuses on production, composition, and user acceptance of recycling-derived fertilizers, RDFs. This work package has focused, as already mentioned, on production that has resulted in 3 outcomes: inventory report on existing recovery technologies, overview of implementation issues that producers of RDFs are faced with, and also success stories. All 3 reports are available for public, and you can find them on the website of Biorefund Cluster Europe. You have a link here on the right side. After production in work package 1, we moved to composition of RDFs by assessing 24 of them from 20 different producers for nutrient content and active biological actors such as Salmonella and E. coli. The last point in work package 1 to assess was end user acceptance of RDFs via survey. And these last 2, composition and end user acceptance, the reporting for them is still ongoing, and they will be published. The reports will be published by end of this year. However, of course, in the upcoming slides, I'm going to present the main conclusions. But before we dive into production of RDFs, I would like to provide a brief problem statement of ReNu2Farm project. You already had the opportunity to hear in a video during the coffee break that Northwest Europe has regions that are faced with nutrient surplus. And those ones are Netherlands, Flanders, north of Belgium, and Brittany in France. And as the surplus regions, they are also known for quite some uptake of recovery technologies to produce RDFs. In the context of ReNu2Farm, it's important to clarify that we identify RDFs as a more up-concentrated in comparison to the raw or primarily separated biomass, meaning their nutrient content availability and content is improved, thus increasing their agricultural value. So even though those regions produce RDFs, they're not always allowed to apply them on their land due to legal framework. For example, we have nitrous directive that limits application of animal manure and animal manure-derived RDFs on the land up to 170 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare per year. Also, the surplus regions are known for higher phosphorus soil status, and they have in place local legislation that limits application of phosphorus, and it can go as low as 40 kilograms of P2O5 per hectare. So even though they have surplus of nutrients, they still use synthetic fertilizers in order to fulfill the gap between the allowable application limits and the actual crop requirements, which are always higher than the legal limits. And we know that mineral fertilizers, the production, can be energy intensive, for example, in the case of nitrogen, via Haber-Bosch process, and also it can be dependent on non-renewable sources such as phosphate rock. On the other hand, in Northwest Europe, we have regions that require nutrients, so they're not surplus. We can call them in this context still deficient. That's Wallonia, south of Belgium, North France, eastern part of UK, and Ireland. Those regions in particular have a higher demand for phosphorus fertilizers. And therefore, to tackle these regional imbalances of nutrients, ReNu2Farm project aims to increase recycling rates of nutrients, of fertilizers, of RDFs in this context, and also reduce the dependence of mineral fertilizers by trying to reconnect these regions, and also by trying to develop the producer and consumer collaborations. So how did we do it? First, with the production, as already stated, we had some outputs in the form of the reports. Here on the right side, you can see the overview of the schemes of the biomass processing techniques in the green and nutrient recovery techniques in blue that are taken up mostly in Northwest Europe. And also to the interviews with RDF producers, we came to some findings when it comes to the bottlenecks of production. In general, the bottlenecks in implementation are inevitable, and they can be split over 4 categories, let's call them like that: financial capital, technology, operation, and market uptake. Of course, at the beginning, we need a capital, and it has been noticed that banks are reluctant to finance biogas plants. Hence, biomass recovery technologies or nutrient recovery technologies implementation as well. For example, in Flanders, there was a period when quite some anaerobic digestion plants went to bankruptcy, which of course led to the situation that banks were less reluctant to finance the new projects, and it's still the case at the moment like that. So you need to look for external capital to attract it. Once you do find a capital, you have to look at the technology, but you need to keep in mind that the technologies are really tailor-made for the needs of the user. Meaning, if you see a certain technology at one site, you cannot copy-paste the technology to your own site, because it can depend on the goals that you want to achieve. For example, if you want to reduce the water content in your output, it can depend on the viscosity of your feedstock. So a lot of aspects need to be taken into consideration. Another point are technology providers, which are scarce. Also, they're quite focused on one certain technology, so their expertise focuses on one technology. It's more difficult to find a technology provider that can provide entire, let's say, a train of technologies, like different process steps, and it also makes it difficult to compare the offers. And at the end, once you do end up having your process steps, for example, anaerobic digestion, mechanical separation, stripping, scrubbing, or evaporation, all these process steps have to be aligned, which requires intensive startup testing and tuning, and this can take over a year. Once the technology is set, then you have operation. And there it can happen that you need expensive chemicals and solutions, which you will know in advance, because certain technologies like stripping, scrubbing need chemicals for regulation of pH, for the recovery of ammonia, you need some acids. Also, if you produce liquid RDFs, they still can contain quite some amount of water. You might need to extend your current storage capacity. Cost of transfer can increase, application costs. Nutrient variability in the feed can cause also fluctuations in your output. So in your energy output and also in RDFs, the composition might change. And at the end, also the producers, they communicated that lack of skilled technical staff to repair the machine is there as well. So in future, there will be quite some demand for skilled staff to work with these technologies. And finally, of course, the market uptake. have you already heard that manure-derived RDFs, they compete with animal manure for application on arable land? That's legal framework that can cause bottlenecks on market uptake. And also certain technologies can receive a lot of criticism from general public, for example, incineration. So you might have to also invest in your communication aspect. And at the end, of course, end user acceptance. From the production, we come to composition of RDFs. As already mentioned, we collected 24 of them, and we can characterize them as ash, compost, digestates, where we also have evaporator concentrate and solid fractions. Then we have category of struvites and liquid nitrogen products. And here in this table, we want to showcase the relative presence of the constituents in these RDFs, meaning if you are interested in nitrogen, you should look at liquid nitrogen products such as ammonia water, ammonium nitrate, ammonium sulfate, because in those products, the total nitrogen that is present will be already in plant available form. For phosphorus, you should look at ashes and struvites. Potassium you will find most in compost and digestate, and also in some liquid nitrogen products such as liquefaction, pig urine, and reverse osmosis concentrate. For organic matter, that will be compost and digestate. And at the end, we have metals, which are more of a tension point, because if you have too high concentrations in those products, meaning above the legal limits, you will not be able to market your products. The highest concentrations can be found in the ashes, and then some moderate concentrations in compost and digestates. Next to the nutrient content, we also analyzed 13 RDFs for biological actors, where they were compared against the control, sterile water, triple superphosphate as a synthetic phosphorus source, and calcium ammonium nitrate as a synthetic nitrogen source. And there we checked for the bacterial and fungal cells. When it comes to bacterial cells, it was noticed that the higher amount of cells were found in RDFs that are rich in carbon, such as compost and evaporator concentrate. And for fungal, they were basically negligible or absent completely. So you have 0, that means absent, except in a compost that was 100% derived from pig slurry. Other parameters such as salmonella and listeria were not present in these RDFs. Also for E. coli and Campylobacter, we detected less than 10 CFU per gram milliliter of every RDF. And according to fertilizer regulation, the maximum allowable limit is 1000. And finally, no presence of viable weed seeds. This brings us to the end user acceptance of RDFs. And for this, we conducted a survey to investigate the farmers' understanding and knowledge of RDFs, their opinions and attitudes towards using RDFs, willingness to accept them, and barriers to use them. We had quite good response, over 1,200 responses across 7 countries: France, Belgium, Ireland, Germany, Netherlands, Luxembourg, and UK. First question was asked to check the knowledge and their opinion via open-ended question. It was basically, of which RDFs have you heard of? And for that, a word cloud was produced, where the compost came on the top, followed by digestate, and then sewage sludge. But you can also notice that quite some respondents stated none. They have not heard of RDFs. Therefore, we repeated the similar question, but just in a closed way, where they got a list of RDFs and they had to state of which ones have they heard of. And compost came again on the top, similar as an open question, and also sewage sludge and digestate, so in similar way. But here we can see that they also heard of others. So basically this made for us input that it seems they have heard of RDFs, but they have not heard of the term of recycling-derived fertilizer. And therefore, as a consortium, we have started a series of educational videos and campaigns to educate and inform users of recycling, nutrient recycling, and also final output RDF products. After this question, we wanted to check their willingness to accept RDFs from which type of sources. So we listed 5 of them: animal manure, urban green waste, food industry waste, sewage sludge, household waste. And as you can see, they were very likely to accept animal manure. So after that, urban green waste, but the least likely to accept household waste and sewage sludge. The reasons why, well, we are not 100% sure, but we know that in certain countries, in order to be a part of a food quality scheme, you are not allowed to use sewage sludge, so that might be one of the reasons. And why would be what would be the reason for not considering to use RDFs? As you can see, the safety aspect came on the top, and mostly in terms of heavy metals. And at the end, price is here. So we wanted also to see one of the other questions was about currently which RDFs they use and which RDFs have they used in past. And here you can see that compost comes on the top. So they use the most compost at the moment, more than in past, followed by agro-industrial effluents, and then by sewage sludge. But if we zoom into sewage sludge, you can see that they use it nowadays less than in past. Why is the reason for that? Again, might be food quality scheme, but also we wanted to ask about their experience. What kind of experience they have while they use the RDFs? Was it positive, negative, or neutral? And the most positive experience was with agro-industrial effluents and compost. So those are, again, the two RDFs that come on the top of the previous figure as well. But the least positive experiences they had with municipal waste and sewage sludge. So actually, maybe the negative experience of using sewage sludge has influenced the current trend that they're using it less nowadays than in past. Here we see the overview of important qualities in RDFs from a user perspective. And here we have divided users, so people that use RDFs, and non-users who have not used it until now, but might. So what do they think about this? And for the users, you can see that for them, the most important is nutrient ratio that fits the crop nutrient demand, followed by high organic matter content, price per unit of nitrogen or other nutrient, certification, and then use. And if you look at non-users, we see the shift in the answers, where the price comes on the top. And actually the nutrient ratio that fits, which was here at the top for the users, it comes now on the 4th spot. And after the price, the more important for them is ease of use and certification. But we can also notice for the least important things that both users and non-users care is slow nutrient release speed and possible mixing with other fertilizers. So that does not seem that relevant for them. What kind of qualities RDF should have in order for them to encourage them to substitute mineral fertilizers? They should have a known NPK concentration that came on the as the top, nutrient ratio that fits the crop nutrient demand, and high organic matter content. So here we actually offer them to state 3 most important qualities they could choose from the list, and those 3 came on the top. For the known NPK concentration, this seemed the mostly important for the Irish users and Belgian users, where 90% or more answered that this is the most important quality. And when it comes to the nutrient ratio that fits with crop nutrient demand, that seemed the most important in the case of French users, where over 80% stated that. And finally, what would be the preferred RDF texture that they will be willing to accept and work with? For both farmers and farmer advisors, they agreed on this. Both prefer granulous, followed by liquids, and the least are interested in powder and pastes. So to summarize the survey results, the most known RDFs nowadays are compost and sewage sludge, most willing to accept animal manure, urban green waste, least willing to accept household waste, sewage sludge, currently in the use the most compost and agro-industrial effluent. They also have with the same ones the most positive experience, so that's obviously they use it the most. And the top 5 desired properties in the RDFs are nutrient ratio that fits with the crop nutrient demand, high organic matter content, known NPK and composition, ease of use, and finally the product cost. This also brings me to the final conclusion of this entire presentation, where we can put users, producers, and RDFs, let's say, in a sort of a triangle, whereas the first corner of this triangle, RDF producers still require more funding opportunities to actually stimulate the production of RDFs, to stimulate this market. They need assurance in the market uptake, which is also dependent on legal framework. Of course, if there's no users to accept the product, there's little interest in implementing technologies to recover nutrients. For users, they need more information on RDF's characteristics and their performance. Promotional campaigns would be needed. And of course, again, acceptance is dependent on legal framework. And finally, the RDFs as the final product, they need to be nutrient stable, safe. There should be possible optimization according to the crop needs. It seems really important for the users, and they should be available at a competitive price. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any further questions, I'm here to answer them. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Ivona. I think this was an excellent overview of this element of work. I think highlighting the bottlenecks was very interesting in that it gave a very nice holistic view on the various issues. We all know that a lot of these products are available, but getting them into the farmer and getting them at commercial scale does pose a bit of an issue. I also found the composition of the RDF products also very interesting to see what the difference was between the various products and how they compare with each other. I thought it was also very interesting. If you would like to know more about some of this work, please check out our breakout rooms at the end of today. Breakout room number 8 will be on safety, use and legislation. So if you want to have a little networking event, that would be a very nice room to join. Before we move on to the next speaker, don't forget that if you do have any questions for Ivona or any of our speakers, please pop them in the chat and we will go through the responses in the question and answer session. We might move on now to our next speaker. The next speaker we have is Imke Harms. Imke is from the Nutrient Management Institute, and Imke will go through the agro-ecological assessment of the various products. She will also look at the nutrient value of the various RDFs, the results of the life cycle analysis, but she will also highlight some key messages to policymakers. So I will hand it over to you there, Imke, so you can take it away. Thank you.
Hello, welcome to this presentation of the ReNu2Farm session. My name is Imke Harms, and I represent here the Nutrient Management Institute from the Netherlands. And I have the honor to present to you today the results of work package 2 of ReNu2Farm, which is the agro-ecological assessment of recycling-derived fertilizers. And I will give you insights into the performance and environmental impact of recycling-derived fertilizers. So what do we actually mean? What did we do when we say agro-ecological assessment? So we studied the agronomical and environmental effects of recycling-derived fertilizers, and this was done in lab, pot, and field experiments mainly. And the focus thereby was on the nutrient efficiency. So what was the crop yield, what was the nutrient uptake, and the fertilizer replacement value compared to classical mineral fertilizers when we look at this novel recycling fertilizers. And when it comes to the environmental effect, then nitrate residues, nitrate leaching risk played a big role. And also climate mitigation potential was looked at. So how is the long-term soil carbon evolution, and within life cycle assessment, the carbon footprint was evaluated. Now our colleagues in Ireland at IT Carlow and University of Limerick, they're specialists in nematodes, bacteria and fungi. And I think this is a quite unique feature of the ReNu2Farm project, that we looked into how do these soil organisms react to the application of RDFs. And so before and after was compared. And also when you look at the treatment with conventional mineral fertilizers, how do nematodes, bacteria and fungi react differently to to these novel fertilizers. And also with looking at bacteria and fungi, you can also tell something about the phosphorus and nitrogen mobilizing potentials in the soil, since these organisms play a key role in there. And yeah, so ReNu2Farm was really a project with a lot of different field trial locations and testing in the field of these fertilizers. And I think that's really a big step towards practical experience. And so field trials were carried out in Belgium by Agro, in the Netherlands by NMI, in Ireland by Chagask, and in France by Averlis. And different, you can categorize the fertilizers a bit. So in Belgium, it was mainly about liquid nitrogen fertilizers, namely ammonium sulfate and ammonium nitrate, which were compared to digestate, liquid fraction of digestate in pig urine. And in the Netherlands, the focus was on organic carbon-rich fertilizers, household waste compost, and grass clippings. Whereas in Ireland and France, the focus was on phosphorus, so studying struvites and ashes. And in France, additionally, comparing this to organic sources of phosphorus, namely animal manure composts. Yes, so now I will guide you through really only the key main results. It's quite a challenge to summarize all this work in just a few slides, a few minutes. But so the first category of fertilizers, the enriched recycling fertilizers studied in Belgium. So here we're mainly talking about ammonium sulfate and ammonium nitrate. And ammonium sulfate, when it comes to the nutrients, showed a very good fertilizer value, good crop yields, fair and fertilizer replacement value of up to 84%, that of calcium ammonium nitrate. And whereas for ammonium nitrate, the results were a bit mixed. So in the first year in maize, and the end fertilizer replacement value was 90%, and in pot trials even higher than the count treatment, so over 100% in lettuce. But then in the second year of field trial in spinach, only 70% of the end fertilizer replacement value. And it's not fully understood, but the young seedlings of the spinach encountered the fertilization plus then right away very dry, hot weather conditions, so that some plants even dried off. And the suspicion is that there was an interaction with these weather conditions and that caused root burn. But this is definitely something that would be interesting to study more. And the evaporator concentrate, which was used in pot trials, showed relatively low crop yields, and the suspicion is that a high sodium content was responsible for this. Talking a bit about the practical handling, so ammonium nitrate and sulfate have the advantage that their composition is less variable if we compare to digestates and slurries, for example, and also consistent over storage time. So you can sample once and then apply this nutrient content values also weeks later. And the ammonia water that was used in pot trials had a strong odor. In general, and this accounts for all field trials, we hit with 2019 and 20 very extreme, dry, hot weather years, and which made water a limiting factor over the nutrients, and it's difficult to interpret our results. Looking at the environmental and ecological assessment, so for nitrate leaching risk, we didn't find any indices that this would be higher than from mineral synthetic fertilizers. The nematode diversity was reduced with ammonium nitrate and pig urine, but stayed the same for ammonium sulfate and the reference treatment. And this is a positive sign that nematode species that are known to be very sensitive to soil pollutions increased in abundance even with the ammonium sulfate. And but the overall community structure was unaffected by the fertilizer treatments. The same for fungi and bacteria. They showed no significant changes, although the bacterial diversity increased a bit with the recycling-derived fertilizers compared to the references. They seem to have a positive effect, all of them, on the bacteria. But the community structure remained stable, and also the nitrogen fixing and cycling capacity was stable. Now let's take a look at the P fertilizers. So with P fertilizers, we're mainly talking about struvites and ashes, and they were evaluated in Ireland and France. in grass and spring barley. And for both of these trials, struvite showed a very good P performance, very good P availability, replacement values of over 100%. And yeah, very positive results. Whereas for ashes, the results were rather poor. So in France, in spring barley, even only maximum 6% P fertilizer replacement value compared to TSP. And suspicion is that the high calcium or aluminium and iron contents that were observed in the ashes could be a cause for this short-term low bioavailability. But we also suspect that the long-term availability could be good, and this would be good to study this more. Practical handling, the powdery texture of ashes was a problem also. It was difficult to spread homogeneously, and in France, additionally, it was almost impossible to find a field that is deficient in P. And then you observe even low P use efficiency for TSP, so it makes difficult to interpret results. So. Yeah, soil organisms, how did they react to struvites and ashes? So the nematodes, their diversity in community structure with struvite and poultry litter ash was not affected. It was similar to TSP. And but with sewage slash ash, the number of nematode species that react sensitive to pollution decreased. So this is something that would need to be looked into further to see, is there a risk that sewage slash ash affects negatively nematodes. For the fungi, there was no impact of the fertilizer application, and also the bacterial diversity was similar or sometimes even higher compared to TSP and cattle slurry. The bacterial capacity to cycle and mobilize P was stable, but interestingly, the ashes favored the P cycling microbial community in the long term. So this could be that also we saw a poor performance of P from ashes in the trials, but it could be that at long term also this positive effect on the microbes leads to a good availability at more long term, also more for slow release P fertilizer. And the last category of recycling-derived fertilizers that we were studying were the carbon-rich amendment types. And here there was trials in the Netherlands with household biowaste compost, and in France with animal manure. We have to see that the trials had a different objective. So the Dutch trial was focusing on nitrogen and soil organic carbon, whereas the French trial was focusing on the P fertilizing effect of the manure composts. But when it comes to the biowaste compost in the Netherlands, after 3 years of trial, we did not see any increase in the soil organic carbon content, but that is normal. That was expected. This is very long-term processes over 20-30 years, and this would be this we cannot judge after 3 years of trial. There was no yield differences, however, or uptake differences between the treatments. So compost performed in its nitrogen value as well as cattle slurry, as well as the mineral reference treatment. And fertilizer replacement values are always lower for organic products. We can see this here. So for compost at the 2 trial locations, it was -20 or 38, and for grass clippings 12 and 70%. But for cattle, it's also not higher than 29 or 47. So in general, if you dose compost well and grass clippings, these type of fertilizers, then they have a good and can secure good crop yields. The manure composts, when it comes to the P fertilizing effect, also performed well or even better than the TSP reference. So they showed a 2 to 12% higher apparent P recovery than the TSP. Challenges were that in the virgin grass clippings, sometimes impurities were observed. This cut roadsides, there's garbage, there's plastics. So that's a problem and would need to find a solution. And there was also quite a weed pressure in germination tests. And in general, as we said for the other field trials, the drought makes results difficult to interpret. Here, Aveniste with the AMG model from France carried out a small small modeling to give an idea of the carbon evolution over long term. So this is the animal manure compost that we use in the French field trials, and the assumption is that the compost is applied every fourth year. And we can see that, after reaching an equilibrium state, that's just after about 8 years, the composts all maintain well a stable level of soil organic carbon, whereas the blue line in the bottom, that's if no organic product was applied, then the soil carbon decreases. But yeah, we don't see any difference between the different animal manure composts, that one was better than the other for this. Speaking a bit about the nitrate leaching risk of compost application. So this was studied in the Dutch trial, and the residual harvest and min values in autumn were not higher of the organic products than from mineral fertilizer references or the cattle slurry. So we conclude that there's no increased nitrate leaching risk after 3 years of application for compost and grass clippings. And in general, the levels of residual nitrogen after harvest were quite low, probably because the weather was dry. The crops in long periods over the summer could not take up any nitrogen. And long-term studies would be necessary to validate this result. Let me say some words on the life cycle assessment that was carried out within ReNu2Farm. The life cycle assessment looks at very different categories, but here we chose to look at the carbon footprint and the climate change impact category, and it's the results are expressed in kilogram CO2 equivalents. And you can see we evaluated, or the colleague from University of Ghent evaluated 5 different products. Ash, ammonium sulfate, pig urine, ammonium nitrate, and struvite. And it is always compared a baseline scenario compared to the project scenario. So baseline scenario, in the case of poultry litter ash, for example, would be just applying raw manure to the field as fertilizer, whereas project scenario now is we incinerate, we produce a poultry litter ash. And what is the difference in the carbon footprint of these 2 scenarios? And then if you look at the results, you can see that for all the 5 RDFs that were evaluated, the carbon footprint is reduced with the treatment, with the upgrading of the material. And so, for example, the poultry litter ash, this is 10% decrease in carbon footprint, and this is due to the energy production mainly. You know, when incinerating, you also produce energy. You save other energy sources that would be needed to produce energy. And so this is, and we see that the effect in emission mitigation is the highest for pig urine, 56% decrease, and for ammonium nitrate when stripping scrubbing in comparison to not treating slurry is a big gain in carbon footprint. Yes, so let me conclude some points. In general, we can say that the most of the RDFs that we studied in ReNu2Farm showed rather promising fertilizer properties and no few indication of negative impacts on the environment when it comes to nitrate leaching risk and soil organisms. If we look deeper for the nitrogen fertilizers, ammonium sulfate was really proven to be a good end fertilizer and had even positive effects on soil organisms, whereas ammonium nitrate had mixed results, and it needs more research to confirm that it's a valuable and safe fertilizer. For the pea fertilizers, the struvite showed a very good pea fertilizing effect, whereas ashes at short term, not so much, and long-term studies would be very interesting. And the idea would also be to say ashes, is it not rather a good idea, also because of the powdery texture, to use them as a component in fertilizer mixes rather than as a pure fertilizer themselves? And this would be good to look into more also. For compost, there's no indication of increased nitrate leaching risk, and at long term, they're expected to be a valuable contribution to soil organic carbon contents, but this would need validation in more long-term studies. And for the life cycle assessment, compared to the baseline scenario, which is applying the manure and the sewage as raw to the field, all the evaluated treatment technologies decrease the carbon footprint of the products. Yes, that was it from my side. I thank you for your attention, and I want to hint to the BioRefine cluster website, because that will be where we will publish most reports in the next few weeks to months. And so you can find reports on all the field trials, also the protocols and how the field trials were conducted. They are already online. So you can read much more in detail on the results, on the setup, on the RDFs that were used. And also we have some interesting publications more for practical use for advisors and farmers, which is a handbook that really summarizes on how to fertilize with straw wire, how to fertilize with compost, and 2 decision support tools also that are all accessible online for free and to everyone. So yeah, thank you very much, and we look forward also together with the colleagues that carried out the work that I was able to summarize here today to answer your questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Imke. That was another excellent presentation. And it really shows clearly the level of diversity in terms of what we analysed, how we analysed it. It was excellent to see so many different things. So we saw the role of biological indicators, such as the nematodes were investigated, to see that the impact the RDFs were having on the soil. It was great to see that we had field trials, and these field trials were undertaken in different countries and in different crops. So we really get an excellent view of the RDF potential. And then we kind of circulated all this around, and we started looking at the life cycle analysis and the carbon footprinting. So it really does show that we took a holistic view of the RDF products. Now, if you would like to find out more about these this work, don't forget our breakout rooms, which will take place later today. So if you'd like to find out more about the field trials, that will be in breakout room number 6. If you'd like to find out more about the carbon footprinting, that is in breakout room number 7. Breakout room number 9 will be for the biological indicators, and these breakout rooms will allow you to network with some of our researchers so you can find out more details. Again, if you have any questions for Imke or any of our speakers, don't forget to pop them in the questions, and I will pop them in the chat and I'll ask those questions to our panel at the end of the next presentation. So for our final presentation for this session, I will return to Katja Weiler. Katja will go through the various aspects, including legislative issues. I'm sure she'll give us an excellent overview of the fertilizer regulations, etc. So take it away there, Katja.
Hello, this is again Katja Weiler from IZES, and let's start with the outcomes from the policy framework and market introduction strategies for the recycling-derived fertilizers. I will present briefly the cluster of the region and the farmer RDF demand side, followed by the main findings on the policy assessment for RDFs to accelerate cross-border trade in Northwest Europe. Further, we have calculated the economic value of specific RDFs based on the nutrient and organic C content, which I will present for sewage sludge and greenery cuttings. Due to the targeted RDF market uptake, I will portray the chosen methodology for the regional market introduction strategies for the assessed regions. All results in full length will be published at the end of 2021 at our project website. Let's start with our research on the fertilizer demand in Northwest Europe regions for market uptake. If the fertilizer composition gets adapted to regional and crop-specific needs, the chance that the product is more attractive for farmers are increased. As a result, interactive maps for Northwest Europe on fertilizer demand have been designed. We took into consideration the crops being cultivated, the soil type and nutrient status in terms of P and K, as well as fertilizer recommendations and limitations of the regions. Results, here the maps you can see on the slide, showed that RDF demand exists across all regions, even in regions with high livestock density, where animal manure is already largely used as a source for nutrients. However, the desired composition in terms of the three main plant nutritions, N, P, and K, as well as organic carbon, differs largely between regions. Overall, it can be stated that the pure concentrated RDF will find its use everywhere. It's common practice to apply a basis fertilization in terms of NPK, often in the form of animal manure, but most crops receive an additional nitrogen supplement during the growing seasons. Further, we combined these agronomic requirements and demands with the results of the farmer survey on awareness and acceptance. Due to the clustering method, we were able to define the main characteristics for farmers for each region, which are willing to use RDFs in the future. We integrated different information and produced regional specifications. At the slide, the main target group and demand for France, I portrait you here. But beside the economic demands and willingness to accept RDFs, the conditions for making fertilizers available on the new West European market are regulated under European and national legislations. Currently in place is the European Regulation number 2003, providing a European certificate for harmonized fertilizer trade. This regulation almost exclusively covers fertilizers from mined or chemically produced inorganic materials. But closing the loop for sustainable agriculture through a valorization of RDF in Europe is not covered here under. This comprised, for example, the organic or a combination of organic and inorganic fertilizers from waste or animal byproduct sources. Another obstacle for free trade and use of RDFs in Europe is the waste and the animal byproduct status. Animal byproduct is here short ABP of the single RDF, causing severe administrative and logistic restrictions on handling, transport, and use. The so-called end of waste or end of ABP status for the RDFs differs in all member states. To this stage, cross-border trade of RDF is not harmonized and needs to comply with each specific member state regulation on, for example, environmental and safety requirements when market uptake is desired. Alternatively, producers can follow the administrative procedures for market access under the instrument of the so-called mutual recognition agreements between the member states. On these slides, you can find the requirements as an overview, how approval authorization in Northwest European member states are currently regulated. The full analysis you can find in the legal assessment report to be published end of this year. In the first row here of the slides, the European regulation on CE marking for fertilizers is portrayed, which is clearly not covering the upcoming RDFs. The authorization of a RDF use is often under different derogation schemes in the member states, where the criteria on quality, nutrients, pollutants, etc. differ. A harmonization is currently not reached for these approvals. But from summer 2022 onwards, fertilizer producers, traders, and farmers will be confronted with the new European Fertilizing Product Regulation, the so-called FBR, to implement the circular economy, finally. This is a big step for receiving the CE mark and the labeling requirements for a wider range of fertilizer products, such as organic fertilizers, organo-mineral fertilizers, growing media, but also biostimulants for the first time. The RDF must meet the harmonized environmental and safety criteria of the new regulations in order to be traded freely within European Union. According to the contents, for example, nutrients and thresholds for heavy metals, these RDFs can then be categorized under one of the 7 product function categories. Here you see in blue. And this means that they lose as a result their waste status. This is a big effort. Also, RDF can get categorized under 11 component material categories here in green as input materials for fertilizers. When they fall under these component materials, this will not change their waste status. It is not obligatory to comply with this CE market criteria for this cross-border trade. You still can follow the mutual recognition procedures between the member states, which makes it but currently very complicated. So as presented, the fertilizer product regulation facilitates the entrance of the RDF in the single market of the European Union. But within this regulation, this new one, and under other European legislations to be in compliance with, some outstanding issues still remain to be solved. For example, fertilizer products containing animal byproducts and their derivatives, for example, household compost or digested from manure, you see on the left, face barriers for free circulation within the single markets. The establishment of newly defined and harmonized endpoints of ABP for RDF is important. Here, an adequate list of endpoints needs to be defined under the new regulations. The waste status of struvite and ashes that, as a component, are not foreseen to be labeled with a CE mark with the current version of the FPR. But the Joint Research Center of the European Commission has meanwhile provided criteria to use struvite, ashes, and biochar for the production of a fertilizer European product as a component. It is planned that these will be amended under the new fertilizer product regulation, which will be applied in July 2022. In addition, quite of importance, the European Nitrate Directive hampers the uptake of the ammonium nitrate and ammonium sulfate RDF groups, as they are quite often derived from animal manure. The field uptake of animal manure fertilizers is limited under this European Nitrate Directive with 170 kilogram per hectare per year application. On the other hand, chemical fertilizers do not fall under these limitations. A current research study on renewable products proposed the end of manure status for these groups, ammonium nitrates and ammonium sulfate fertilizers, if they meet the criteria of a minimum of a nitrate higher than 90% in total. As we facilitated evaluations also in the project of the composition of the RDF products within the ReNu2Farm project, within the requirements and criteria of the relevant component and product status of this regulation, we could show and evaluate that for struvite, here the outcomes of the assessments were that there are options to be categorized as product or component. For ashes, the option is used as component. This is possible, but the heavy metal thresholds are quietly overtaken. So it cannot get marked as a fertilizer product, but as a component. Beside the CE marking options, this waste status remains a barrier for logistics of struvite and ashes as a component material categorization for free and easy trade. For compost and digestate, those products show options as a fertilizer product or also as a component. The liquid end product groups, some products comply with product criteria number 1, or also with component criteria for the animal byproducts. But these criteria are not defined yet for the animal byproducts. To wrap up, the release of the new fertilizer product regulation in summer 2022 will be a big step forwards RDF cross-border trade and harmonization. So coming now to the economic assessment. In ReNu2Farm, we calculated also the economic value of specific RDF based on the nutrient and organic C content. Today, I give you a rough overview of the methodology we applied for calculating the market value and the example calculation for the project partner soil concept, certified sewage sludge and greenery cutting compost. We derived this methodology from a German certification standard for RDF, the Royal Gütezeichen compost. The values of nutrient and humusi should be higher in sum than the production cost for positive RDF marketing. The production costs are individual. Further costs like transport and distributions could be also incorporated. This formula gives you an idea of a product value for price negotiations on the target market. But this value is not representing the actual market price in the region which follows other mechanisms, as for example, willingness to pay, availability, or other alternatives. So how did we do the calculation to calculate the nutrient values and which nutrients we have to consider? This table shows the input values for the nutrient value calculation. On the right column, you see the reference fertilizer. Right beside you, you see the net trading price sourced by the current European and German trade statistics of 21. The euro value of the nutrition of the reference fertilizer is stated in that column. This value is multiple with the specific content of the specific nutrition in the RDF product. For phosphorus, potassium, and calcium, you can allocate 100% of the nutrition content of your RDF, but for nitrogen, only a share can be applied. These values are given here for solid and liquid RDF products. Regarding the humus C value, this calculation is more specific, and it is depending on local conditions for the RDF application site. The humus C value depends highly on the need of your customer to compensate losses. For example, the reference scenario is the humus C lost by sales of the crop straw on site. On the right table, you see which items we consider. At first, you have to determine the cost for providing the straw to the market, for example, collecting, conditioning, transport, etc. Second, there are costs to compensate the loss of nutrition of the sold straw. If the market price is higher than the specific cost, it's obvious to sell the straw to the market, but the humus C loss must be compensated. Our method used as a reference for compensation is leygrass, as it has similar properties of straw in regard to humus C content. As a reference system, this cost plus a risk surplus of 7% has been used. On the left, you see the resulting graph, which shows the specific value of the humus C depending on the market price of straw. The equations show you the calculations of humus C value per ton for solid RDF or cubic meter of liquid RDF. This means the higher the market value of straw in your region, the higher you can assume the value of humus C content in your RDF product. Applying this methodology for the project partner soil concept, sewage sludge, and greenery compost, we show the value for the different market prices for straw. As the nutrition values are not changing, the humus C value is getting 10 times higher just by doubling the market price for straw. For example, with a market price for straw higher than 90 euro per ton, the humus C of your RDF product dominates the total value. The total value of this specific product can be really high if nutrition and humus content is 100% requested by your customer. It is depending on the customer needs which share of this total value you can really consider. So let me close my presentation with the outline of the market introduction strategies. Based on the results of the ReNu2Farm project research, guidelines for a marketing strategy for RDF were developed. We considered here in particular the legal framework, the certification options, the product description, and also the farmer survey on the acceptance and desired properties of RDF in Northwest Europe. In addition to the roadmap, in adding RDF marketing aspects, a second report on regional market introduction strategy was prepared for the countries in Northwest Europe. We started with the target market analysis as a basis for a market launch of RDS products. It is important to know the regional market conditions, nutrient ratios, and components, etc. The target market description based on the agricultural conditions in the target regions, the descriptions of the deficiency and surplus in the main nutrient sectors, the trading partners for the logistics, experience in nutrient management and documentations, and cooperation for nutrient management and the customer analysis. For the RDF product launch, we followed also the methodology of the four marketing Ps to define a unique selling proposition, the USP, to answer the key questions for product placing by RDF producers. The product and assortment policy, the price and conditions policy, and the distribution policy and communication policy are here the key aspects to think of. End of this year, we will publish those regional market introduction strategies for the RDFs. This will be a sort of a fact sheet for the single regions with specified information gathered in the total ReNu2Farm research. This concludes, for example, a short overview on the agricultural situation of the region, regional specifications of the agriculture, here seen in the maps in the beginning, information from the farmer survey, but also we integrate special features for the regional marketing of the RDFs. So thank you so much for your attendance, and please feel free to raise questions on our joint research.
Thanks very much, Katja, for another very informative information. It's very nice to see the interactive maps that were generated and where we can see that there is a demand for these recycled nutrients throughout Northwest Europe. I thought the legal obstacles to cross-border trade for RDF was very interesting, and I'm sure the market value for the RDF products will be of interest to many here today. If you would like to find more about the capitalization work package of ReNu2Farm, Katja will be in one of our breakout rooms, breakout room number 10, which will be on later this afternoon. So before we begin our questions and answer sessions, can I ask all of today's speakers to perhaps turn on their cameras, just to make it a little bit, so we can see each other a little bit better. I'm not certain if you want to go into speaker view or something like that. I think it might help people see us as we go through the questions. Okay. So I'm just going to start off. Do we have Imke here?
Yes, hello.
Hi, Imke. How are you? I think I'm going to pose the first question for you, if that's okay. So one of the first questions that came in today during the session was, do we take it from this that, and all the work, that RDF products, that they're safe and that they are okay for the environment? Can we conclude that? Like, is the quality of the RDF products to such an extent that there is very little risk to the environment?
Yeah, I think I was able to show with also the more detailed results that we didn't find any striking indication on very big risk. But this is for our trials, and because of the short time of the project, we could only do 2 years of field trials. So that's very short. Plus we had these extreme weather conditions. So it's difficult to draw 100% sure conclusions, but our indications, the trends that we see from ReNu2Farm trials are rather positive. And I think it gives a good basis to continue working on evaluating. Mm-hmm. That's of course it's always difficult to draw 100% safe, and I wouldn't give the go 100% now for all of these products. But yeah, especially also in the nematode and the soil microbiology assessment, there was few indications on very striking pollutive impacts. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. The next question that came in on the chat took place while Ivona was speaking, but I think actually I might answer that question. And it came in about how did we get so many farmers to take part in the survey? And I am from Munster Technological University, and we were one of the lead for the farmer survey. And I think what the main outcome of that was that each partner played to their strength, and a different approach was taken in different countries. So as Tome is mentioned in the chat, in Ireland, the Irish Farmers Association was one of the associate partners. So we worked closely with the Irish Farmers Association to get the information about the survey out, and we used our social network. And other countries took a different approach. But I think a main thing what we used our contacts. The vast majority of the partners who are working have close contacts with the farming industry. They've worked in this area for a long time. And I think that just shows that we have a good connection with the farming community and that they responded by responding to the survey. Another question that came up in the chat there is perhaps for Katja. Katja, he was asking, this one comes from Imke Harms from N2 Applied, and they were wondering that there is going to be a continuation of this project through the CAP, and they were wondering if there was an opportunity to perhaps assess other RDF products under the CAP initiative, or maybe there is not. Maybe you'd like to just take an opportunity to explain what we're going to do in the CAP a little bit more there, please.
Yes, thank you so much for that question and for the interest of it. So in general, we have applied for this extended duration of the project to target on new target groups. So that means the horticulture sector will be one important player for the uptake of RDFs. And to make here tailor-made research for these target groups means so we have also to analyze RDF products for the horticulture demands. And that means we are also running pod trials currently from N-based RDF fertilizers on different plants in Belgium and in France. And there we are conducting these pod trial assessments. And so this has already started. But we are looking forward to uptake also other trials, but we are a bit limited from our budget. And this might be, let's say, the natural barrier for analyzing pretty much more. But we should also look for synergies. So it means step back with other projects who did already research on other RDFs or for other uptake demands, and that we can integrate the outcomes of that. So, and what I also wrote in the chat, maybe you can join our breakout room number, I think it's now 10. Am I right? Okay.
Yeah, it's 10.
Yes, later, and then we can talk more in detail also with the pod trial facilitators, our other partners, what we still can use.
Okay, thanks very much, Katja, for that response. The next question that came up in the chat was from Viljami Keno, and it was, does digestate contain also sewage sludge-based digestate, or are there under sewage sludge? So I think this question again was in relation to the farmer survey. So if that's okay, Ivona, I might just take that question if that's okay. So when we were designing the farmer survey, we asked questions which were unprompted. So the first one we asked was, which RDF products are you familiar of? And here digestate came up as one of the two most popular answers. We then went on, the next question was to ask them to pick from a list to see which types of RDF products they heard from. Now in this list we had digestate and sewage sludge separate. The one difficulty we have when we're designing a survey for Northwest Europe is that different countries call things something slightly different. So from an Irish context, for example, sewage sludge in its raw state or treated state in that it might have had lime added or something to adjust the pH is still commonly applied to land. This is not done in other countries to the same extent. So we decided we just put digestate. Now digestate means that it could have come from any form of process. So it could have been sewage sludge, household waste, any sort of other things, whereas sewage sludge was actually in its sludge form. At least that's what we intended, but we hope that was gotten across by the participants of the survey. There's another question here, if that's okay, for Imke, I'm assuming, and it's from Matthew Braven. And he was just checking, was there an issue of soil acidification with ammonium containing RDF products? So Imke, are you in a position to answer that, or is there someone else from the consortium who might be in a better
No, yeah, I saw that Amrita already replied in the chat also and said that the soil pH measurements were not revealing this. And yeah, in the background I also got other messages. So the soil pH was not affected. But Ivona, do you want to add?
Yes, I can add. So yeah, we worked with ammonium sulfate and ammonium nitrate. The pH of the products
was already around 6, I believe 6.1 for ammonium sulfate and 5.8 for ammonium nitrate. So not that acidic. And indeed, they have higher concentration than the other RDFs, as they're completely already mineral form, meaning that you need to apply also lower quantities to the field to satisfy the allowable nitrogen allowable limits, a legal limit, or the crop nutrient requirement limit. So you're applying less, and at the end also we know in practice the soil has its own buffer capacity, and such a small amounts will not, in this short term, experiments will not affect the pH of the soil, which was also confirmed at the harvest time when we analyzed the soil pH for all the treatments and compared to the unfertilized control, and there were no differences in pH seen at this short-term experiment that we had of 3 years, so field trial of 3 years.
Thank you very much, Ivona. There was a follow-up question again from Matthew Bravin. I know there was a couple of responses in the chat, but I would like to ask the panelists here directly. And it was in relation to the high efficiency of struvite in comparison to triple superphosphate. Okay, so again, we presented some of the results there. So I'd like to open it to our panelists. There's a number of suggested reasons for that came up in the chat. So who would like to take that there?
I'm sorry, can you, I think I'm getting a bit lost in the chat. Can you say what the question exactly is on the?
Can you explain why struvite has a very high efficiency in comparison to triple superphosphate, please?
Oh, why? Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, first of all, we just measured and observed this. And it was observed in the French trial as well as in the Irish trial, so on different soils, and also in grass and in spring barley. And I think the idea is, I mean, you can always say that the uptake of the phosphorus that you apply with TSP is also not 100%, right? So TSP marks the 100%, but maybe of the total phosphorus that you apply, this is only 70% of what you apply. And then struvite just performs better than TSP, meaning that probably the release of phosphorus from the struvite is more adapted to the dynamics that the plants actually, that the crops need the struvite. But yeah, maybe we can open the floor if some of the colleagues that actually carried out the trials want to.
Akeem there has his hand up, so I might pass over to Akeem there. Hi, Akeem.
Hello, hopefully you can hear me.
Yeah.
So basically for phosphorus, there are different results, but basically if you make a very rough assumption is that of the mineral phosphate that you apply on your field, you will find about 20% of that in your crops in the first growing season. That means 80% of the P that you apply to your field will not be in your plants. So it will be somewhere else. Could be still in the soil, could be leached into the groundwater, could be runoff from surface water. So these 20%, give or take, depending on the crop and the environmental conditions, these are now our 100%. Okay. So, and that means, of course, if you have another fertilizer that is being taken up more efficiently, then of course you can have several 100% results here. So again, so you could have theoretically up to 500% of efficiency. So we have here more than 100%, and the working theory behind the struvites is because it is in a particulate form, it's a secondary mineral. It will take a little bit longer to be dissolved and to get access to it by the plant than with the triple superphosphate. So the release of the mineral fertilizer is quicker. And that means that it may no longer be available by the time the plant needs it, or at least that the struvite has a slight advantage in the field by a slightly slower release. So that's at least our working theory.
Okay, thank you very much, Akeem, for that clarification. I'm just going to move on to the next question, which came from Julia in the chat, and it's in relation to life cycle analysis. And they were wondering, was the environmental performance also compared to mineral fertilizers in the LCA? So can we have some take for that?
Yes, yeah, I received a message from Rahul, who is the one who carried out the assessment, and he said that it was not directly compared, but the mineral fertilizer avoidance was taken into consideration in the scenario for the RDFs.
Okay.
But yeah, so Rahul is the man for the LCA, and he's also available in a breakout room later.
Excellent.
If you wanna dig deeper on that one. Yeah.
Lovely, thank you very much. Another question that came up in the chat was in relation to the publications. So a lot of the work that we've undertaken in Renew2Farm, it is available in various places. Perhaps I can ask Imke or Katja, if people want to find out more about the outputs and I suppose the results from the Renew2Farm, where can they go to get some of the publications?
Okay, maybe I can just start. So we are intending to publish all of our reports and results on two, let's say, pages or sources. The one is, of course, the Renew2Farm European Network webpage, and where our project is displayed completely. But the other place to promote our results and all the documents there is the BioRefine cluster webpage. And I think Imke has already typed in the web page name of that, if I saw that right in the chat. And these two, let's say, web-based sources will be the place where all the reports and the videos and everything like that will be published to use.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I have one very quick question. It's the last question that came up on before we close the session. And they were looking at what technology was used to analyze the fungi and the bacterial dynamics. So I think there are responses to that in the chat, but if anyone here would like to take that very quickly. Yeah, Tome, please unmute your microphone there. You've got a few minutes there, just quickly.
Yes, hi everyone. My name is Tomaika Duarte from IT Carlo and involved in the agro-ecological assessment of the recycling-derived fertilizers. And as I said in the chat, to elaborate a bit more, and there will be a session later on. We are in room number 9 if people have more appetite for more detailed discussion of this kind of work. Overall, we use DNA-based analysis. I'm a nematologist by training, and my colleagues in IT Carlo did also work on the bacterial communities. But working with nematodes is actually quite tricky. They're animals that many people avoid working with them because morphological ways of analyzing them can be very laborious and time-consuming. So we opt for molecular-based analysis. So DNA-based methods mostly were used for this kind of work. Same for the bacterial and the fungal microbiomes in the project. And subsequent to that, we subcontracted an external company for next-generation sequencing. We got a lot of data, and we had good collaboration from the University of Madrid, not within Renew2Farm, but as external contacts that we had other scientific links. And these guys taught our workers this program of analyzing microbiomes and communities in the soil called CHIME. So we felt that applying this extra level of analysis made some sense of all the magnitude of data that we got. I hope that's of help.
Thank you very much, Tome. So I think the time has come for us to close this parallel session. I would like to thank our 3 speakers today, Katja Weiler, Ivona Sigurnjak, and Imke Harms. I would like to finally draw your attention to our breakout rooms. So if you'd like to find out more about anything today, we've got a couple of breakout rooms. So breakout room number 6 is on the field trials and the various aspects of the nutrients. Room number 7 looks at the carbon footprinting of RDFs. Room 8 is on safety, use and legislation. Room 9 is on biology. And if you would like to look at the CAP and stimulating new markets, please pop along to room 10. So the breakout room is just about to close. So we'll go back to the main room and we will have coffee started, and the panel discussion will then start at 1:30. So thank you very much for attending today's session, and I'll see you all at the panel discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, bye.